All right. Well, I know folks are still joining, and we'll let them in as they come into the Zoom, and we'll get going though. But thanks so much for joining us again. Welcome. This is Integrating Academic Standards, Common Core into Edible Education Experiences and Lessons. And my name is Russell. I am the Network and Training Manager here at the Edible Schoolyard Project, and I'm so pleased to be um, co-presenting and presenting and passing the mic to Jenna Mobley and Molly Rose Williams, two leaders in the field of edible education, doing a lot of amazing curriculum work and facilitation and teacher training work. It's a real gift to have their time and expertise on the subject. And so I'm so excited for today's workshop. So with that, I'll pass it to Jenna.
Hey y'all, I'm Jenna Mobley. I've been a teacher here in Atlanta Public Schools since 2008. I was a second grade teacher and a fourth grade teacher, and that's where a lot of my experience and the lessons you'll experience today will come from, but it will apply to all grade levels. And Molly, would love for you to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Molly. I grew up in Berkeley and attended King Middle School, where the Edible Schoolyard is located, when I was in middle school and loved it. And so I went back and worked there as a plant intern and eventually worked in the kitchen as a chef teacher for 3 years. And since then, I've been working doing curriculum development for mostly science, thinking about how to integrate NGSS into non-traditional classroom spaces. But I'm excited to be here with you all today.
And I wish we were all in the same space, but we're going to do the best we can to make this feel as interactive and to gain all of the wisdom that you all have too. And even though we're in a virtual space, I'd love to invite us to come on camera. If you can, wave to everyone, come off mute, say hi. It's going to sound like a bunch of noise, but it makes it feel good. Like we're not alone in our houses all over the place. Go ahead and come off mute and say hi to everyone and give us a wave,
Hello.
and let's get a feel for who's here.
Hi
Hello.
everyone.
Hi. Hello,
Hello.
hello.
Oh,
These people. Oh, I love seeing all these faces. Thanks, y'all. It gives us a quick feel of who's in the room. And Russell's going to put up a poll, and we'd like to hear a little bit about the experience that's in the room. The first question you'll see will ask about your comfort level with Common Core math specifically. One being, this is brand new to me. I'm not so sure about it. 10 being, I'm an expert and I can't wait to get in those breakout rooms and share some of the things I've tried. After that, you'll see that there's a question about what is your comfort with Common Core literacy specifically. One, again, being totally beginner to this, 10 being very comfortable, very familiar, lots of experience. And lastly, let us know what grade level you teach. This can direct some of our conversations and some of the examples we give today, and we'll make sure that we all have relevant information to go home with. When you finish the poll, if you don't mind also, if you can rename yourself in Zoom by also putting the grade level or the grade level range next to your name, that'll be helpful for us in a little bit when we go into breakout rooms. We'd love to get you into a room with some folks that are teaching in the same grade band if possible. If you could take a minute and just rename yourself, that'll make that a little bit easier. If not, if you're driving or if you're not sure how to do it, it's not a big deal. We'll make sure that all of the breakout rooms have some activities that are relevant for all the grade levels, but that is an option for now. Okay, it looks like we have a lot of folks that are new to Common Core math and a little bit of experience, 5 to 8. Literacy is a little bit more scattered across the board. Great. And a lot of elementary school between pre-K, kinder, first through fifth, some middle school, one in high school. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that and letting us get to know you before we get started. All right, last thing before we dig into our agenda is I would love to hear from y'all. What do you hope for your students after spending time with you in the garden and kitchen? Think big. Your kids have spent time with you in the garden and kitchen all year long. You get to May 28th or whatever your day is, you get to the end of the year. What do you hope for your students? But here's the trick. We're going to share this in the chat with only 6 words. You only have 6 words to wrap up. What you hope for your students after spending time with you in the kitchen and garden this year. Put those 6-word poems in the chat when you have it. An example might be connecting with the earth and others. That's what I hope for my students at the end of the year. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing these. Meaningful time together, life skills, confidence, community, fun, respect for the earth, family, curiosity, agency. Ooh, delicious. I'm glad that was in there. Curiosity, passion. Amazing. I hope we can keep these in mind through our time together, because I really feel like integrating math and language is not only a way to connect to the standards and help the kids on their tests, but it's really a way to further deepen and connect children's experiences in the garden and kitchen and reach all of these goals that you're talking about. This is a way to reach all of your different students with all of their different modalities so that they can all feel confident and build their life skills and have that curiosity and build that passion in this way. I'm going to pass it over to Molly to talk about how we are going to talk about math and literacy today and how we can reach all of those goals that you shared in the chat.
Yeah, so we're going to cover some ground. We're going to start with math and just get a little intro to Common Core math. What is it? And then Jenna's going to share a model lesson and show some variations and extensions. And you're going to have a chance to play around with that with some other folks in this call. And then we're going to jump to Common Core literacy. Again, there will be a model lesson and then some other considerations that you might have when implementing these standards in your classroom. And then at the end, we'll have some time for debrief and application. There are some materials that you might want to gather. If you don't have these, it's not a big deal. But if you do, you're going to be able to participate in these sample lessons more fully. So if you are able to access newspaper, ruler, protractor, scissors, a pencil, seeds, ideally a variety that can be direct sown in the spring, and a fruit or vegetable to taste and blank paper, that's great. If you don't have them, then you can just use your imagination and follow along the best you can. And there'll still be a lot to get out of this.
All right, so we're going to get started with math, and then we'll move on to reading and writing towards the end of our time together. With math, with any of these sets of standards, you can really dig into the nitty-gritty of the specific grade level and all of the different standards and elements of each all the way through the school year. But also, I think it's helpful, especially since many of us in this room probably teach multiple different grade levels. I think it's helpful to look at what are these big buckets? What are the big ideas that extend across many grade levels that we can be integrating in the kitchen and the garden classrooms? There's a lot of fancy language, even just here, even just looking at these big 5 areas. But I wanted to break it down a little bit into some big ideas that we can refer back to. One is being that students, of course, are doing a lot of numbers and operations. And that means in kindergarten, they're doing counting and cardinality, which means putting things in order, connecting 1 to 1 object, 2 to 2 objects. But then as we get into K through 5, they're doing addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and then building more of an understanding of the number system into decimals in that 6 through 8 range. The next big category is algebraic thinking. And so this is putting together, we probably don't realize how much algebra we do on a daily basis, but this is these equations where we're trying to find this missing piece and we're solving for something. And that goes anywhere from kindergarten all the way through high school. The next section is about fractions, ratios, proportional thinking. A lot of this happens, of course, in cooking in the kitchen, but also in the garden. So that's parts of a whole. The fourth category here is measurement and data and all of the different ways that we measure in the kitchen and the garden, whether we're measuring lengths or diameters of trees or the circumference or the weight of something. And collecting data, that could be taste test data, creating bar graphs, picture graphs, anything like that. And this last category is geometry. Think about that as our shapes and our angles. These are just some really big ideas, and we're going to do a model lesson where you'll get to use a lot of these ideas in practice, and then we'll debrief on them. But that'll give you a framework to start thinking about what are the types of things that all students are learning about in math, kindergarten, all the way through 12th grade.
I want to just point out here that there's a lot of crossover between the NGSS standards and the Common Core Math standards. So when we're thinking about applying Common Core Math standards in our classroom, we're also by default going to be supporting students in learning some of these NGSS standards, things like using mathematical and computational thinking, asking questions and defining problems, the cross-cutting concept of patterns or structure and function. All of these things are very tied into the math Common Core, and we're not going to go into that right now. But Jenna and I were talking about how that can be a really helpful way for integrating standards into your classroom to start feeling a little bit less daunting when we start seeing how often they really are interwoven and supporting one another.
Thanks, Molly. All right, y'all, we're going to jump into our first model lesson. So I'm going to stop my screen share, and I should be pinned. Make sure that you can see me on whatever device you are, because I'm going to be your teacher for the next couple of minutes. And students, you are going to cross a couple of different grade levels. We're going to offer some math prompts for all levels from K all the way up. And I want to say from the beginning that I'm going to cover a lot in this lesson that I would not cover all of that with students all at the same time. I'm giving y'all a little taste of a lot on purpose, but for students, you would pick out just one little part and focus on that, right? So this will be a version of a model lesson, but take what works for you and leave the rest. All right, students, welcome to the garden classroom. Today, we are going to explore what seeds need. So first, wherever you are, make yourself into a little seed. And let's imagine we are a little seed growing. You're a seed that wants to grow, planted in the earth below. I'll start to grow up a little bit with sun and water, with sun and warmth, water and rain, and a little bit taller. Slowly, you begin to change. Your stem comes sprouting from the ground. If you're somewhere where this is going to feel really good, feel free to stretch up with us. Your leaves reach up, your roots dig down. You rise up strong, you rise up tall, giving food and life to all. And students, if we were all in the same room, this is about the time that all the students start running into each other and falling down because they're reaching out. And we could say, you didn't have enough room to grow. Look at that. No one could grow to their fullest potential because you were right next to each other. And when you're trying to reach your leaves out and get all of that sun and get all of your air, you ran into your friends. So seeds, let's try this one more time. This time, plant yourself somewhere in this space where you will have enough space to grow. And then we go find a new space and we go through the rhyme all over again. Then every seed can grow up to its fullest potential, all the way up where they're all stretching and they're not touching each other. That is one way that we can start the idea of seed spacing and how important it is, even for our youngest learners, for our kindergartners, that everyone has the space they need to grow. So now, students, if you have your newspaper handy, we are going to create a garden out of a newspaper. We are going to plant seeds on our newspaper, and at the end, we're going to plant that newspaper in the ground, cover it up with soil, give it the water, sun, soil, water, and air. That newspaper is going to decompose, and those seeds are going to grow up. But we need to figure out how to plant our seeds on this newspaper, and specifically, how far apart each of our seeds should be. First, if you're following along at home, you need 1 square foot of newspaper. In the chat, share with me, how would you make 1 square foot? You might have a ruler, you might have a tape measure, you might have a protractor. What would your method be for cutting a square foot? What is the length of each side? What do you think? Or raise your hand if you'd like to come off the chat and share how would you solve that problem to make a square foot garden? Start with 1 line. Take a ruler and make 12 inches on each side. All right, so we had someone share that a square foot means 12 inches on each side. Ruler's 12 by 12, 12 inches by 12 inches. Maybe it's a square, depending on the grade level. We could measure the angle. What is that angle? Someone in the chat. If we had our protractors, what would we measure if we were in 5th grade? 90 degrees. Great job, students. All right, that's already a challenge. And for some of my students, I go ahead and cut out a square foot. And actually, this newspaper that I'm using happens to be a square foot. A quick note to the teachers in the crowd, please check your newspaper for content before you pass it out to children. That's important. Notice I have the Cat Lady newspaper on purpose. I've gotten the good ones for the students to use. All right, students, depending on the type of seeds that you would like to plant, you are going to divide your square foot garden into different sections. I'm going to share my screen again so you can see all of the options of what you could plant. All right, students, if you would like to plant lettuce, basil, and marigolds, your challenge is going to be to divide your square foot garden into 4 equal sections. If you would like to plant bush beans, beets, and spinach, your challenge is going to be to divide your square foot into 9 equal sections where every seed is equally far apart. And if you would like to plant radishes, carrots, and onions, your challenge is going to be to divide your square in 16 equal sections. Students, you may want to use your knowledge of arrays. What number times what number? This is algebraic thinking too. What number times what number equals the amount of equal parts that you would like? You might need to use your understanding of division. If this is 12 inches and you need 3 equal parts across, you might have to divide 12 by 3. See if you can figure it out. If you do have your newspaper, and if you do have your ruler, and if you have your marker, see if you can figure out how to do this problem, students. In just a moment, we'll have someone come off mute and share whether they use fractions, multiplication, arrays. Walk us through it just like a student would, but take a second to figure it out on your own first. All right, so we have someone using folding. This is a great technique too, is that we could fold in half. That's one of our fractions. Folding shows us that we have 2 equal parts. That's in half. And if we fold in half again, we have 4 equal parts. That is one way to use fractions to find your equal parts. This is part of the reason teachers, if you are differentiating your groups, that 4 is the easiest to solve. 16 is actually the next hardest, and 9 is the hardest because it's hardest to fold in thirds. And so you have to rely more on your understanding of arrays and division. So let's think about if we're doing 9 per square foot and we can't fold. Raise your hand if you can come off mute and tell me what you would do. What math would you use to figure out where to draw your lines, how to turn this 12-inch by 12-inch square into 9 equal parts?
I would divide 12 in 12-inch square into, by 9.
Uh-huh.
With the, what is that, 1.25 or something? Is that,
Uh-huh.
yeah, 1.25 inches.
Uh-huh.
And you make a mark each 1.25 inches both ways.
In
Up
both
and-
ways.
Up, down.
Huh?
And lengthwise and widthwise.
All right. And then what would you do?
Make little squares.
Okay, so you'd have lots of little squares, lots of little squares. You might even have more than 9 little squares. You might have 9 times 9 little squares.
You're right. You're on.
Uh-huh. Yeah, but keep
Okay.
going, keep going. We're working on the mathematical practices, or you can call on someone else. What do you think, Stephen?
Somebody rescue me.
Who else? Students, we're adding all of our knowledge together. We're working on this together. Remember, the mathematical practices are just as important as the right answer. Raise your hand or come off mute if you can help.
All right, I'll try it again.
Okay.
I'll try it again.
Okay.
It's 144 square inches, 12 times 12.
Yep.
Divide that by 9.
Okay.
And you get, I got my handy spreadsheet here. You got 16 square inches.
16 square inches. How would you do that?
Means 4 by 4.
4 by 4.
4-inch squares. You should have 9 of them.
Okay. So you could do
3 times 3. You go across. Well,
yeah.
I'll do it on my little piece of paper, right?
Okay, we're getting there.
4 by 4, 4 by 4, 4 by 4. 4 by 4, 4 by 4, 4 by 4.
Great.
4 by 4, 4 by 4, 4 by 4.
Yeah. Okay. So we figured out, and there's so many different ways, so many different practices you can use. But either way, Stephen told us if we go 4 across here and draw a line, 4 across here and draw a line. So you could think about there's going to be 3 boxes here. And if you do the same thing, 4 inches, draw a line, 4 inches, draw a line, there'll be 3 boxes here. So 3 times 3, using our understanding of arrays, will equal 9 boxes. That's one way to check. The way that he figured out that it was 4 by 4 was very big math. That was very cool. Also, if you knew that there were 3 boxes this way and 3 boxes that way to make 9 boxes, you could take 12 inches, divide it by 3, which means 4 inches for each box. Are we following that? Yeah, there you go. And we got another idea in the chat here. Divide by 3. We have 10 centimeters and then 3 boxes on each side and 9 total. Yeah, we got it. So all of our students of all these different grade levels did this in lots of different ways to figure out how to eventually get to, let me see if I can measure mine, a quick version of 9. I didn't measure, spoiler alert, but 9 equal parts. And these are 9 equidistant places for a seed to go right in the middle. So here's the next challenge, students, is that let's say you did 9 per square feet. You can plant as many bush beans, as many beets, and as many spinach as you want. They could be different in all of these squares. You could do spinach, 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 beets, beets, bush beans, bush beans, bush beans, bush beans. You can fill up your square garden with any combination of those plants that are on your list. Show me in the chat what fraction of your square foot garden would be each of those crops. What fraction of your garden, if you're doing 9, would be bush beans? What fraction would be beets? What fraction would be spinach? And they should all add up to one whole square foot garden. We have some brave folks in the chat. Yeah, so maybe Robert's going to do his equally. So 1/3 is going to be one crop. 1/3 might be another crop. And 1/3 might be another crop. So we could do 3/9 plus 3/9 plus 3/9. 3 parts out of our 9 equal parts could be one crop. 3 parts out of our 9 equal crops could be another one. And 3 parts out of our 9 equal parts could be another crop, which would add up to one whole. And you could get more creative. You could decide, I don't really like bush beans that much, but that seems like something really cool to go in the middle of my garden because I want something big and bushy and green. I'm going to put one bush bean right there. And then I'm going to do 6/9, or you could make that fraction 2/3 are going to be beets and just a little bit of spinach there and a little bit of spinach there because I only like it sometimes. So 2/9 are going to be spinach. 1/9 bush beans plus 2/9 spinach plus 6/9 or 2/3 beets could be your garden. This is one of the first grade standards, but a lot of these grade levels are working on these fractions of a whole. So now, students, let's see how many of us are there here today. There are 23 students here today, and we each have a square foot garden. If we were all in the same place together, we could go outside and we could design how we want to plant these square foot gardens in the ground. Oh, I forgot the most important part of planting our seeds on them. Let me tell you real quick how to do that. When you have your seeds, let's see, here's my marigolds and my basil and my lettuce. If I was doing the 4 per square foot, you would take one seed and put it right in the middle of each of your equidistant parts. And then what I do, but I'm open to ideas in the chat too, is I put a little bit of flour in a cup with just enough water for it to get sort of sticky like glue. I don't know the exact measurements, but I just watch it. And when it's too crumbly, I put a little more water. And if it gets too liquidy, I add a little bit more flour. And then we put just a dabble do ya, is what we say. A dabble do ya right on that newspaper and put that seed right on top. Once that is dry, you have your newspaper with your seeds, with your glue right on top. This is also a great bulletin board activity, a great rainy day activity, because you can hang it up and you can say, look what we did. We made this garden. Let's imagine we glued all of our seeds down and we have our gardens and we're outside, all 23 of us, and we're going to design our garden. Students in the chat, share what would the area of our garden be if we laid all of our newspapers down side by side? What's the area of our garden? And include the units if you can. There's 23 of us. Let's see. 23 square feet. Nice job. That would be the area of our garden. Now, if we needed soil for that garden, let's say we have beds that are 1 foot deep. We have 23 square feet of our garden, and we want 1 foot of soil. How many cubic square feet do we need of soil? How many does that, the volume of the soil we need under? Oh, and I'll answer that question in just a second, Stephen. Cubic square feet of soil. If we have 23 square feet of gardens and we need 1 foot deep of soil. There we go. 23 cubic feet of soil for the volume of our bed. Nice job. And yes, Stephen, we do just 1 seed in each of those squares. Of course, the germination rates is another great math problem. If you can figure out the germination rate or have the students figure out the germination rates of their seeds and figure out that percentage by tracking how many they planted and how many popped up. Okay, and the last questions we could explore, students, is what would be the maximum from, actually, we can see if we can do this in the chat. We'll see if we have any math whizzes. What could be the maximum perimeter if we wanted all the longest perimeter of our garden bed so every student could get all the way around our garden bed? What would that maximum perimeter be? How could we lay this out where we have the longest perimeter around our garden? And how many boards would we have to buy? We'll see if that's a bonus question. We'll see if anyone sticks that in the chat. And then you could also ask students how we could create the least amount of perimeter. Let's say we have the least money to buy the boards from Home Depot to make our garden. So how could we arrange these? In what array could we arrange these to have the shortest possible distance, but include all of our square foot gardens? 48, is that right? 23. So if we lay them all side by side, 23 plus 23 is 46, plus 1 on this side and 1 on that, 48. Nice job. See how we did some of this math? This is a lot of visualization, and I know I'm moving fast. This is for lots of different grade levels. And then we could figure out what the least possible perimeter could be too. Lots of different math standards we can work on here. All right, students, you can turn back into teachers. Good job hanging in there with that model lesson, pretending to be students, doing that mathematical practice. I'm really hoping that I was able to offer a lesson that felt challenging, that felt like you needed to go through the mathematical practice of trying one thing, then trying something different, and then double checking another way and moving around manipulatives to figure out how to solve a problem. There are a couple of variations to this that I can offer depending on your grade level. With my kindergartners, we do seed tapes instead of the square foot gardens so that they're just measuring length over and over and over again. This is just a 1-inch strip of newspaper, and my kindergartners are practicing measuring length. So whatever that seed spacing is, they lay out their speeds, and you can see here the popsicle stick with a little flower glue on there too that they use for that. And then you can also do this directly in your garden. So on these garden beds, I had my students measure out square foot, and that's just twine and little nails or tacks on the sides of them stuck in there so they can visualize that square foot. And I think that day we were planting okra, so there was only 1 per square foot there, but you can do it there right in the garden. I've also seen like a lattice that you can like put down on the garden, then to plant, and then pick it back up and take it to another bed and put it down and plant in the square foot. Lots of different ways, but the square foot gardening idea offers a lot of opportunities for math and math of all different levels and in all of those different big idea buckets. And that's one that is hopefully applicable to you all as spring comes and it's time to plant again. Now we're going to have about 10 minutes to spend in breakout rooms, hopefully by grade level, if you were able to put in on your name what grade level you'd like to work with, to talk about not only your experience of this specific lesson, what did it feel like, what was hard, what was easy, what was that one little thing that you could grab to do with your students, but also what are some of your other favorite math lessons. I'll turn it over to Russell to share a little bit about how we're going to get into those breakout rooms.
Thanks, Jenna. Yeah, so if I see a few folks on the chat posting, but yeah, so just a reminder again, if you're able to hover over your name and click the More button and then add what grade level or levels that you want to be in a conversation about, that'll assist with me as I route folks to your associated breakout room. So, so we'll just take a few, this will be like a 2 or 3 minute like routing process and we'll give it a go though. So if it works, it'll basically send you, you won't get it'll send you directly to the breakout room and we're aiming for about 3 to 5 people per room. So, so appreciate everyone's, patience as we work through this, and you should be sent to a breakout room pretty shortly here. And also feel free to come off a mute if I can be of any additional support. So, but yeah, here we go. So, LP.
All right, y'all. Welcome back from your breakout rooms. I hope y'all had a chance to chat over what this lesson could look like with your group or some of your other favorite math lessons. There were a couple of other just little artifacts from my classroom I grabbed today that I wanted to show you as just easy grab and go math items. Oh, one was another variation for the square foot gardening. This is a template that students made as a performance task for the same thing, and it's just a piece of cardstock that's 12 by 12. But instead of actually planting the seeds on the newspaper, they just poked a hole in it so that they could go out to the garden and press their seeds through, and it would still be the same distance apart, and then take it somewhere else and press the seeds through. That's another way to do that square foot gardening lesson. I also have, this is our bar graph that we keep about the weather, and we just track this every day with the type of weather and add to our bar graph. This is laminated, just dry erase. And that gives us data to talk about every day, is how many days were either rainy or cloudy, how many more days were sunny than cloudy. It's an easy grab and go. And then we have a line graph for the weather, for the temperature. So we can watch, these are the days of the month, and we watch the changes over time. And of course, the great thing about a line graph is if we forget to collect it one day in the garden, we have a little gap and we just connect the line. So we're still seeing those trends over time. Some easy little grab and go ways to focus on math daily in the garden. We're going to now move into Common Core literacy. And when we're thinking about literacy, this is another big concept, just like math. There are so many things that fall into the idea of literacy, but I want to give you sort of an outline to frame your thinking around literacy. And in Common Core, these are the strands that show up in every single grade level to sort of frame your thinking. There's always speaking and listening standards. And when we talk about language standards, we'll do a lot of this in our model lesson, but those language standards are things like parts of speech, like adjectives, adverbs, nouns, verbs. It's phonics. It is those beginning pieces. It's putting things in alphabetical order and understanding the alphabet. It's the beginning pieces that lead to writing. And when students start to do writing, we'll look at a lot of different examples of writing projects we can do, but they sort into three main categories that students are practicing across all grade levels all the way to 12th grade. One is that they're writing opinion pieces. They're saying, I have opinion about this. Here are my 3 reasons and my conclusion statement. Or sometimes it's called persuasive writing. Another is informative or informational text. That is, here's our main idea, here's our details, and my conclusion statement. And others, of course, are narratives. That would be more like a story with a beginning, middle, and end with characters and a setting. Those are the types of writing that all students are working on throughout their time in school. And with reading, we have that same sort of categories. We have both literature, narrative, story reading. We're reading books where there's characters and a setting, and we're following the beginning, middle, and the end, and we're predicting what's coming next. That's one type of reading we're doing. We call that literature. And then the other side is the informational text, where we're reading nonfiction. It also often has photographs and captions and charts and tables and a table of contents and index in the back. So where we're getting all those main ideas and details. These are the big buckets, and we'll do a model lesson where you can experience what some of that might look like across different grade levels in your classroom. So this is where, if you have your food, something to taste, pull it out. We are all tasting something different today, but I'm going to walk through some of the language activities that we do with a taste test in a kitchen classroom on a normal basis. And we'll imagine we're tasting the same thing. First is that if we had the opportunity in a kitchen classroom to prepare food together, giving instructions for a recipe is one way to start with some of these sentence structures and word understanding. So we could use, this is called a rebus format, where we have the picture right next to each of the words, and we could use the same sentence structure for each of these, always starting with a verb, like rinse, and then the direct object. Rinse the strawberry in the colander at the sink. Following that same structure gives a formula that English language learners, whether it's their first or second language, can follow that structure and connect those vocabulary words with the picture. Those can go along with having word walls that might look like this, where again, we have the pictures that can be connected with the vocabulary. And you can even categorize those into meaningful groups too, of like, these are all the tools you might need for washing. Here's all the tools you might need for cutting. And when we're getting ready, we've prepared our dish together, we've all read all of our instructions, and we've done all of our cleanup, and it's time to taste, then my students always have like a little rhyme that we say together to build community and to give thanks, and also to build fluency with our reading. I put here on the right a couple of different ways that you can read with students to build fluency. One is echo reading, where I would say, as we sit around this table, and the students say, as we sit around this table, so they hear it and they practice it back. After you've built some understanding of that language, you can choral read, meaning we're all reading together. We still have that support of reading something new. All the voices are heard at once. And then you might take turns and get into more independent reading. But there are steps with any sort of reading that you can build from just echoing to doing it together. It's like the I do, we do, you do sort of model, right? So we're building that reading fluency. Now, this might sound a little cacophonous, but I would love to invite anyone that wants to come off mute and echo read this with me to come off mute so we can hear some voices. There's a little bit of a lag and it's going to be a little silly, but I love hearing your voices and knowing that you're there. So I invite you to come off mute if you'd like, and I'm going to read each of these lines, and I'd love for you to echo read them back. And have your food ready if you can, because we are giving gratitude to our farmers and we're getting ready to taste. As we sit around this table,
As we sit around this table,
let's give thanks as we are able
let's give thanks as we are able
to all the farmers we'll one day meet
to all
all
the
the
farmers one day meet
that helped grow this food we eat.
that
that
help
help grow this
grow
food
food
we
we
eat.
eat.
Great. Thank you so much. We could also add sign language to this if we'd like to, but after we give gratitude to our farmers, we can taste. Everyone take a big taste. You're going to need to experience your food in order to do the next experiences. All right. Now, with whatever you tasted in the chat, share with us what fruit or vegetable did you taste and how would you describe it? Using some of these tasting adjectives, and we have these sorted between adjectives that describe tastes, like maybe some of the big five tastes, like sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and some more complex ones below, and some adjectives that describe texture. In the chat, share with us what did you taste and what adjectives would describe it? What describing words? And after that, fact and opinion is also one. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Fact and opinion is also one of our standards that we work on, is being able to tell the difference between fact and opinion. And so those facts might be those describing words, those adjectives that we're talking about. And now we have the chance to share our opinion. And of course, we have a lot of different sentence frames here that you could choose from to share your opinion. After you've shared those facts in the meeting chat, would love for anyone to share their opinion of what they tasted. What does an opinion statement sound like? These are great, strong adjectives. Nice work. Mild, crispy, sweet, tangy, crunchy. Plain, unripe. Yeah, so I wonder what Jocelyn's opinion statement will be about that pear after hearing those descriptive adjectives. Oh, good. Elizabeth loved her apple, or sweet, tangy, crunchy apple. My favorite. Great. Lots of ways to incorporate language into taste tests. And of course, that would be a great opportunity to collect some data too, to get a bar graph and collect data on if you liked it, loved it, or didn't care for it, and compare what students thought. And with cleanup, here's just another example of how I practice this fluency all the time. This is one of my favorite books to read aloud to students. And we constantly are saying, add it to the pot and let it all rot for compost stew. And the more you can build that fluency into your everyday routines in the kitchen and garden classroom, the more your students will be comfortable with some of the more complex vocabulary and some of the longer sentence structures, and being able to try it together through these structures like echo reading and choral reading. Now we're going to do an activity that's all about writing about the food that you just tasted. And the way we're going to do that, Molly's going to share with us how we're going to get into breakout rooms. And again, you're going to be students. You're going to get to try it. All right, I'll pass it over to Molly.
So you're going to start by selecting a writing prompt on the slides that you're going to complete together as a group about one of the fruits or vegetables that a group member tasted. So you may end up writing about your own, but we really encourage you to do this as a group and see what the sort of like group creativity can fuel. And remember to assign one group member to be the recorder or rememberer of your breakout room number, because we're going to be asking you to randomly share what you create. So you can choose any writing prompt that you felt drawn to.
All right, and I think Ratzel can help us share a PDF a link to a PDF that will go to the next couple of writing prompts. There it is. And we're going to go into some brand new groups of just 3 to 4 folks, and you'll have 10 minutes in that group. So take a minute to introduce yourselves, pick one of these writing prompts, and do finish the writing prompt. Remember who is your recorder and remember your breakout room, because this is your fair warning. When you come back, I'm going to pull out my number generator, my random number generator, and pick some groups to share if they are interested. That's your warning. All right, Russell's going to put you in those breakout rooms shortly so you can get started on your writing prompts.
Awesome. Yeah. And just to confirm, I did, yeah, as you said, Jenna, I posted the PDF in the chat here. If anyone's having difficulty accessing that, please come off of mute. Let me know. I'll repost. But otherwise, are folks able to open that up from the chat? Maybe show a thumbs up if you're on screen and okay, seeing thumbs up. Okay, cool. All right. Opening up rooms now. Everyone should be sent right away and have a good time. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, welcome back, writers and chefs and scientists. So excited to hear all of the pieces that you've written together. I have my random number generator with all of the breakout room numbers on there. I hope you remembered your breakout room number and you have a reporter for each of your groups. Looking
And
forward to hearing your
I didn't
pieces.
get a breakout number.
Oh, you did it? Okay, well, we'll see.
They just came on. I didn't get a breakout number.
Oh, okay. We might have to do this another way. Did anyone else find a breakout number? Is that a universal issue?
We had a breakout room number.
Okay. Well, then
Yeah.
we'll be able to do process of elimination, I bet. We'll try it. Okay. I gotta shake it up. Let's see what it gives us. Number one. Do we know who breakout room number one was?
I think that may have been us. I'm not sure. I kind of vaguely didn't pay attention to the number, so I'll try. If it's not us, I'm sorry, I'm taking your turn. But we did the acrostic poem, and we did it for an apple. So, so it's apple is the title, and then it's always used in the alphabet, picked from a tree, peel is smooth, like it best in my oatmeal, and every day keeps the doctor away.
Nice job, group one. Everyone give some visible claps or snaps or emojis. Show them you heard them. Nice job, group one. All right. Oh, and I was going to show which one. There we go. There is an example of an acrostic there. All right, let's take another group. We're gonna shake it up. Let's see what we get. Group number 4. Does anyone know who group number 4 is? Or we'll take volunteers.
That might have been us. I want to say that, but I can't remember if maybe the first group was for. Oh, yes,
Rachel,
I was
you're
right.
up.
Oh, all right. I don't know how I even knew that. Okay, great.
And
Well,
Rachel, what type of writing did you do so I can pull it up on the screen?
Yeah, I didn't write anything actually down or anything like that, but we did the persuasive paragraphs, and we had a great conversation. And luckily, Sarah had a little young someone in her car, a couple young ones in the car that were part of our conversation, which was very fun. And I would say like we didn't get too far with it because it was very difficult to get. We were trying to get real reasons for not liking carrots with the participants, the captive participants that were in the car with Sarah. So I don't know if Sarah, if you can hear me and if you want to share with what ended up happening with that conversation. She was driving, so it might have been
Oh, yeah.
a little, maybe a little complicated, but so we didn't get to the actual reason. So it can sometimes be, I would say, possibly very difficult to get them to, depending on age and willingness to share, to really share and reflect on what the reasons were. The example of not liking carrots, and Sarah gave, I'll just use her, and I hope she's okay with me using this example, that one of her little ones has never liked carrots and just never liked them. So maybe one of the reasons is because I've never liked them, and because you're not going to change my mind, and because, I mean, who knows what could come out of a young one's mouth about the reason. But like I said, we didn't get very far, but I do love how simple this structure is. And I think that this could be used for any age, no matter how ridiculous the reason or opinion is, which I think is just very simple. I love like the bubble, 3 reasons. It's great.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Let's give a visible clap or snap, or especially for group 4 and all of the students that were involved in that too. Great. Thanks, y'all. We're going to do one more. I'm going to shake it up. Let's see what we got. Group number 2. Who was group number 2?
That's us.
All right, Miss Jill. Which writing prompt did y'all do?
We did the hungry haiku.
Oh, fun. Okay, let me get rid of that one so we can see the prompt. All right, can't wait to hear it.
Okay, title is also apple by group number 2. Red juicy apple, tasty in my mouth, so sweet, fallen from a tree.
Nice job. Give him some claps, some snaps, a seal of approval. Your choice of celebration. Thank you so much, group 2. All right, y'all. These are all writing prompts that I have laminated and we use throughout the year over and over and over and over again. A lot of these, as you noticed, are more of mind maps that help structure our thoughts around writing. With our youngest kids, they can draw pictures in each of these boxes. With our older kids, they can start to write sentences or even paragraphs to fill out these different writing pieces. But these are the types of writing that all students, kindergarten through 12th grade, are working on throughout the years. All right, we're going to move into a little bit about reading about food. I know we all have tons of favorite books about all of the different foods that we teach about in the kitchen and garden classroom. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about, for both Molly and I, like what are the types of questions we ask ourselves when we're looking at a whole set of books about strawberries? How do we pick? Here are some of the questions we ask ourselves when we're trying to select high quality children's literature for our classrooms.
So one of the first questions is, what languages are the books written in? And this might seem like a little bit of an odd question when we're talking about Common Core literacy standards, because those standards are in English. But really what we're also trying to do is make sure that students have access to literacy standards in whatever language they feel comfortable in, and trust that they will continue to develop their English language skills if English is not the most comfortable language for them. And so we want to make sure that they have access to the content and also to more advanced forms of language, whatever that language is for them. So this is one example of a great book. Also, who's represented in the books. This graphic gives you a good sense of, it's from 2018, but is probably still quite relevant, of how imbalanced that is in children's literature that is generally available. And we try and get a really good array of diversity in the children's books that we have for our students, because the students that we're working with are diverse themselves. On the similar note, we try and think about whose perspectives are represented. So not just the identities of the authors or the communities that are being written about, but how those perspectives are being shared. Is it a viewpoint just from an author? Is it a viewpoint that is expressing the view of a larger community? Trying to make sure that students see themselves reflected in the books that we're asking them to read.
And one of the next questions I look at, especially when I go into the library and I say, I want every book on butterflies, is trying to offer students a variety of different text types. In the same way that we just worked on a variety of different writing types, I'd like to offer the same thing to students. So this is just an example from my book box about butterflies, is that I intentionally have some informational texts that feature photographs and captions, with some more poetry sort of texts that are more creative and use more metaphors, along with some biographies in there too, really diversifying the types of texts that I offer students. And similarly, offering students at any grade level many different reading levels. Remember that students don't have to be able to read every single word on every single page all at one time in order to gain a lot from a book. For example, students can read the pictures. They can look at the illustrations and tell their own stories from looking at the illustrations. They could also read the words, similar to how we did the echo reading and the choral reading. They can read the words independently with guided reading help, or it could be a book that is best for a read aloud. And it's often important to remember that some books are great for one sitting. They move pretty quick. They're engaging. All the students are sitting around the garden. They're excited to hear this book that's really short and quick and fun. But some other books are better for breaking up into multiple sittings. So I put 2 examples here from my worm book bin. Diary of a Worm is one I always put in the small group centers because the kids love reading the pictures. They might be able to read some of the words, some of the speech bubbles for the little cartoons, but the pictures are so great that they can tell their own story just following the pictures. But this Wiggling Worms at Work is one that I do as a read aloud. It's an informational text with a lot of great details in it, but I do that as a read aloud during class. But if I read the whole thing, it would be way too long and way too many details, and I would totally lose students. So I just pick a couple of pages to read, maybe at the engaged part of the class, and then again at the closure, and maybe at the next class, just a couple at a time. Just remember, you don't have to read a book all at once, all at one time, just the way that it's written. There's a lot, these are tools that you can use. I also put these up as examples for this same idea, is that this book, First Strawberries, I read every single year to my class. It's a Cherokee story from my area of the continent. And I love the story, but there is one page, you can see I have Post-it notes over it. There's one page where I don't really like the text of it. It reinforces some gender stereotypes that I'm not comfortable with. And so when we get to that page, I just say whatever I want to. I fill in the blanks and I change the story. And I've done this every year for 10 years, and kids do not think twice about it. And we keep moving through the book. And they've never asked. You have the opportunity when you see any text. Not every text is perfect just because it is sold or just because it's in your library. You get to choose how you read it. There might be pages that you skip either for length or for content reasons. You can change any of that. You have permission to use these as tools for your classroom in whatever way is best for your students. And I wanted to share some of the, similar to how we had the writing mind maps, some of the mind maps we can use with students while they're reading to get back to some of these Common Core reading standards, some of these reading skills that students are working on, kindergarten through 12th grade, and what are the easy graphic organizers we can provide them with to encourage the understanding of those standards. And these are split between whether or not you're reading a fictional, a narrative story with that beginning, middle, and end, and the characters and the setting. And for those, if it's a beginning, middle, and end, once upon a time sort of story, this story elements chart is a great one to help structure their thinking about a story and their reading of a story. And you see here, it has the characters and the setting and the problem and the conclusion. Sometimes that problem is called the plot. Sometimes the plot is broken down to beginning, middle, and end. But finding these story elements is one of the Common Core standards for any narrative story that children read. Going a little bit deeper with a narrative story, and especially one like this one, I love Strawberries. This is one of my favorite ones. It has very strong character development in it. And so one of the graphic organizers that you can do is identifying a character. What are the traits that the character demonstrates, and what is the evidence of each of those traits? Again, there's a lot of crossover to NGSS of finding the evidence for your reasonings and your explanations and your conclusions. So looking at characters, traits, and the evidence for those. Then when we move on to these informational types of text, not the once upon a time sort of text, but the nonfiction ones where we're getting a lot of our information. Here are some of the mind maps that work well for that. One is this main idea and details. You'll see this looks very, very similar, if not exactly the same as the writing one. There's a lot of parallels across the two and integrations between writing and reading and forms of text. So this one has, after reading a book like the Berry book, what was the main idea of the book and what are 3 details? For some books, like you can see here, Seed to Strawberry or Strawberry to Jam, the structure of the book is more sequencing. Sequencing shows up both as a Common Core math standard and as a Common Core literacy standard, and that's putting things in order and using transitional words like first, then, next, last, those sort of words. That was one of the writing prompts as well, is to write something in sequence. Obviously, this could work really well for garden tasks. It could work really well for recipes. And a lot of our nonfiction informational books in our libraries are structured in this way as well. And lastly here, anytime you're reading a nonfiction or informational text, and actually this could be true for narrative too, it's identifying these new vocabulary words. What word did you find? What meaning did you glean from the context of it? What sentence did you find it in? And using that opportunity to build that vocabulary one word at a time from lots of different contexts. All right, y'all. We have reached the end, and with plenty of time for a Q&A session. We have a nice manageable group size here, and I would love to just invite y'all to come off of mute and share any of the questions you have thinking about your specific setting, your specific students, and what Common Core math or literacy might look like in your space. What comes up for you as far as questions of what this could look like and how you could integrate it?
Introduced myself earlier to a few of you. I work at a local food bank that has a community garden, and I have a question about I'm kind of going down this path of using resources from Edible Schoolyard. And I want to we have a lot of groups in our community teachers that bring students to our food bank that then has our community gardens. And we talk a lot about, food access points and also just, where do your vegetables come from and stuff. But it's a touch point in our community that we're able to get a lot of kids into a space to learn about it. But I often feel like I want to make sure that teachers are able to check some of their boxes in coming. And we've got the resources of our farmers to do short 30-minute to hour curriculum-based stuff. Do you have a recommendation for, I've certainly used the resources on Edible Schoolyard's website, but and I know it's state dependent and standard specific and stuff, but do you have a good kind of checks? I'd love to be able to offer teachers options of what would you like me to teach today? Do you sort of formatting for that conversation, or I don't know, that might be too broad of a question, but.
It's a great question, and I'll give it a shot and would love to open up the floor to anyone else that can share as well. And first, I want to acknowledge the importance of the question because something that we haven't mentioned yet, and one of the important reasons that we're talking about Common Core math and literacy is that this is the language and the goals of the school systems. Most school systems across our country use this as their checkpoints, their goals. Everything they do works towards these standards. And I think it's important for us as kitchen and garden educators, as we are seeking to build sustainable programs that work within schools or in partnership with schools, that we recognize what their goals are and provide them with those connection points. So as Maggie is saying, so that we can say, we are not only reaching our goals by bringing you here for these field trips, but here is how this is also reaching your goals. And by telling the teachers, the administrators, I'm speaking your language, I understand where you are and what you're trying to do, speaking their love language that is the standards. That's what it is. That ensures the sustainability of programs like ours, most importantly. And that is one of the reasons why I would encourage all of us to get really fluent in their language and get comfortable with these standards. And Maggie, I would say that it is tricky for programs like field trips that have a lot of different grade levels. But what's great about Common Core is these sort of strands that we talked about, where kindergarten through 12th grade are all doing opinion writing or whatever it is. So and if you take a look at the Common Core website, those are pretty apparent. Down on the right side column, it has all the grade levels, but when they break down, you'll see the same strands under each one, and you can sort of click through. There may be a way that you can create a resource that has some of these big ideas using their words, their language of informational text or whatever it is, to give some ideas of how it connects, and it be a resource that's applicable to many different schools and many different grade levels. Are there any other ideas, Molly, or anyone else in the room, to address what Maggie's saying here?
I was just going to say that, as Jenna said, because you're working with so many educators that are potentially going to have so many different priorities, I would say one good place to start is, what do you do really well? What do you feel like your space can uniquely offer? And then start seeing, how can I connect that to the standards? So, for example, I mean, this is a kitchen example, but I'm sure you can think of a garden example as well. I'm in most kitchen lessons that I've ever done, it involves a recipe. So I would start with that and be okay, this is a literacy standard. How can I sort of codify and express what are the literacy standards that are possible to reach with this thing that actually never changes? So what are the things that never change regardless of what you're doing in the garden? And then what are the standards connections that you can draw there? And then see if you can find a couple educators in the community that would be interested in meeting with you for even 15 minutes to share a little bit more about their priorities, and sort of slowly build out from there, is what I would say.
And Maggie, maybe, I'm not sure that I fully understand your work, but I did hear food bank, maybe the unique thing that y'all offer, or just as a nonprofit, is access to a lot of impact data that students can work with. And maybe it is when students come, we're going to look at these impact numbers of the number of pounds of food that was diverted over the years. And they're going to look at these graphs and be able to tell the trends that, for organizations that have big impact in communities, not only is it important for the students to get a sense for that impact in the community and like what's happening with their community resources, but that's a great math standard. All of that data work, and teachers are always looking for real life data to manipulate with their students because they have a lot of worksheets where it's like, here's some fake data that I want you to pretend to care about and decide what the trends are, how much more, how much less. But when you can give them real life data that makes a difference in their community, that might be a starting place. I don't know, but I'd be happy to talk to you about it more too offline.
Okay, thank you guys so much. That's actually, and we're huge on data collection as a nonprofit, so that is, and that gives me sort of a direction to go with older students too. Like data is a great way to, it's easy enough to entertain little people in the garden often, but engaging them academically as they get older, data, you guys nailed it. And thank you, Molly, so much for your insight as well. Thanks.
And I think that's really a great segue to some of the big ideas that we hope that you take away from this time together. And that is that many of these standards can feel really complicated. They can feel tedious. The language can feel like a lot. But if you keep in mind these bigger strands in Common Core and the way that they exist across grade levels, that can make it a lot more approachable. If you can take one big idea that was like, oh, fractions. Fractions is this thing, and it shows up here in Square Foot Garden and here and here and here. If you can take one idea, or data, like Maggie might be taking away, if you can take one big idea, then you can differentiate it across all of the grade levels that you teach. But don't worry too much about finding the like SL32E or whatever the code is and getting down into the nitty gritty. Our role as garden and kitchen educators is just to connect and integrate some of these bigger ideas. And that's what we're hoping you come away with. It's just a couple of replicable big ideas that can work across the different grade levels. I'm going to share my screen one more time here as a way just to say thank you so much for joining us for this time together. Thank you for taking an hour and a half of your life and committing to this time to learn more, to be a better steward of your kitchen and garden program, and to reach more of your students in more ways. If you think back to that 6-word poem you shared at the very beginning of your session, I hope some of these ideas today will go home with you and help you reach those big goals you have for your school year. And I just wanted to say thank you for all the work you're doing for your kids and in your spaces. I'm going to turn it over to Russell to close it out and share about some of the follow-up resources and a finishing survey.